Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me, see my screen. Yeah, I think everything is looking good. Thank you very much, Alethria, for that wonderful introduction. So my name is Daniel Kelly. I won't get into that. Y'all have heard that enough at this point. The talk that I have been giving around AI for the past few conferences I've been attending is entitled Vue Do Magic, AI Development Tricks. However, that's not the title of the talk that I'm giving today. However, there is a little something from this talk that I did want to start off with. And that is this picture right here of me as a teenager. The reason I share this with you is because I think we're kind of all at this point in time with our experience with AI that we're still not exactly sure kind of what all is possible. We're not exactly sure what our role within the entire AI kind of framework is. And that's totally been my personal experience. All right. So I just kind of want to let you know, if you're feeling this way about the way the world is evolving, you're certainly not alone. And I've had quite a few people tell me, just from me, even just giving this talk at several different conferences, this is exactly how they feel as well. So don't worry, we're all in this place where we're trying to kind of figure things out together. And yes, I see someone here in the chat mentions, look at all that hair you had. I do miss that wonderful head of hair. All right, so what I'm going to do today, though, is a little bit more of kind of an experiment, more so than kind of giving you a step-by-step process of how I use AI within my workflow or sharing particular tips and tricks that I've learned. I'm going to kind of try to do a little experiment with you to create a component library with AI and Histoire for writing stories for those components, using Nuxt Layers in order to very easily reuse those components, using Nuxt Content for documentation, and then using Rekka UI for solid component foundations. All right. Let me go ahead, y'all, and I'm going to make sure I'm staying on time here. So just going to create a little timer real quick because I don't know how all this is going to go. And AI can take me down a track sometimes where I just get lost in time. All right. So basically the goal of this little experiment is to create some documentation with Nuxt docs for a component library. What I've got going so far looks something like this. Okay. Where we have different documentation for all of these different components in our library, have a Histoire storybook set up, a book of stories that we can use to visualize our components, and then develop them in this more isolated environment so that we can immediately see the result of our code, and then do all of this just by prompting in cursor. Okay, so as you can see so far, all the components that I've created in this little example project, they work decently. None of these are perfect, but they were all created by me not lifting a single finger to actually touch the code, except for a minor tweak here and there, right? All of these components, such as this accordion here, okay, they were created with prompts. So let's take a look at one of these stories, just so you get a good idea of how a story is actually written. Okay, so over here in my project, inside of the, let me zoom in just a little bit for y'all. Okay, inside of my components directory, here are all of my different components that I've created. All right, and let's choose a simple one. So inside of button, here's my definition of the button component. And then right next to it is the story for that button component. Notice that I am using Histoire. So this story component comes from Histoire. Then I'm just importing the button from the component file. All right. Once again, this was written completely by AI for me. But what you do in this code is you create different variants of your components so that you can see what they look like at one time. So here we see that there are, here are all the different variants. We've got secondary, primary, ghost. We've got different sizes. We can see it with icons. We can see it with loading states, and so on and so forth. So writing these stories is all about creating these different variants that we can then ultimately select here and then copy and paste code so that we can use those in our end projects. Awesome. Now, at the same time, we oftentimes need kind of more public documentation as well. And so what I have set up inside of the Nuxt content in order to power a page that documents the usage of this component is over inside of, let's go to pages and then index.view. Notice that I am querying a collection. So this uses Nuxt content in order to write the docs for all of the different components. So on the home page, all we do is call this built-in Nuxt content function called query collection. The collection that I want to query is this components collection. Notice inside of my content directory here, I have a components folder. Okay. And then inside of this components folder, I have a markdown file for each of my different components. Okay, that's what allows me to get this view right here. All right. Then inside of pages components slug.view, we find the first component that matches the route path. So here we've got the button. And so it goes and it finds the, where is it up here? Content components. Yeah, it finds that button.markdown file, and then it renders it to the page right here with the content renderer function. All right, so under the hood, we're using a lot of pre-built technology, right? Histoire is something that was written by a human. Nuxt content is something that's written and maintained by a human. We're not trying to do all of these things from scratch, which I think is actually an important thing to remember when you're working with AI. If there's already a tried and true and tested solution out there, don't try to vibe code it yourself and start totally from scratch. Utilize what is already available. And that's exactly what we're doing in this use case. Okay. So how does this setup work? Okay, so I said our goal was to create a new component, to create these components completely with prompts. And so what I'm going to do is over here in the chat, let's try a, what kind of prompt have we not done yet? I haven't done a tooltip. That could be interesting. Let's try prompting out for a tooltip. So I've got a workflow document here inside of my cursor rules. We have this workflow.mdc document, and I'm going to tag this inside of my chat because these are the steps that I want Cursor to take to build out a new component. First, I want it to think about the current design system and sample a few of the existing components for inspiration. I've found that it's always nice to just kind of point the AI to some of your existing files, and it can kind of get a good idea from some of those files how you like things. Now, if you do have more strict rules, you do want to add those inside of cursor rules, but examining existing files can be a good start. The next step I want it to follow is to implement the component definition. So actually write the component, right? And I want it to spend the most time it can right here in order to get this right. Now notice inside of my my step number 2 here, I'm calling this other cursor rules file. So Cursor does have this way of like automatically attaching rules to the context. I found it doesn't really work that great, or actually I think I'm really talking more about agent requested. It doesn't really work that great. It doesn't request to include those that context in a reliable manner. So what I found really works well is just kind of giving it hints. So inside of this workflow file that I am manually including myself, right? We give it a hint that when you get to this step, you need to check out this particular rules file to get the information for completing this step, right? I found that works a lot better than just letting the agent kind of do it itself. In that same vein, that same line of thinking, I've also found that kind of giving it hints about when it can call certain MCPs is also really useful as well. So for instance, over here in components, .mdc, this is what we're using right here in this workflow. Okay. Over here in components, I'm telling it, when possible, components should be built on top of Reka UI. And look up info about Reka UI using the context 7 MCP. So I'm very explicit here. Like I don't let it just guess, oh, this is Reka UI. Maybe I need to go look up something. I tell it, hey, this is the best source of information if you need more info on this component library. By the way, Reka UI is a completely unstyled Vue component library that lets you build up your own style components on top of it while taking care of things like functionality, things like accessibility, and other, really important things, but that maybe, that's not the crux of what you're doing. You're building a component library that looks a certain way, right? So Reka UI is a really great base for building your own components. In fact, it's what the very popular ShadCN UI library is built off of. Okay, so back in my workflow.mdc, first thing we're thinking about it, then we're implementing the component definition, then we're writing a story for the component with Histoire. Once again, I'm calling out, hey, this is the rules you need to take a look at in order to write a story. And then finally, we're going to write the documentation for the component inside of the proper docs file. And it says, check out these rules for the docs when you start doing that. Okay, so let's get back to creating that component. I'm going to say create. First, I'm going to tag at workflow. And then I'm going to say create a tooltip component. And let's just see what it comes up with. Okay. Awesome. Just checking. I've been kind of running and going, making sure that I actually am sharing my screen because sometimes that happens while the AI is working. Awesome. Okay. So notice right here, it does go and find those rules for the component. It goes and finds those rules for the docs. It goes and finds those rules for the stories. It also goes and reads my assets theme.css file to understand the available design tokens. This is something I told it inside of one of my rules files. I don't remember which one, but it's continuing to move on here. That's one important thing to note, though, is over here in theme.css, I basically went through a chat GPT session and made some of these, ask it to create a design system for me with design tokens that are compatible with Tailwind CSS version 4. And since a lot of the LLMs aren't up to speed with Tailwind CSS version 4 yet, I pasted a link in there to some of the appropriate Tailwind docs so that it could look them up. And it basically created these different design tokens for me. Okay. I found that if I just try to start from scratch, when I'm designing something, it doesn't so much work. But if I ask it to create some design tokens first, some commonly reused CSS variables, that it does a much better job. So that's what it was doing there. It was checking the theme.css file to see what kind of variables it had access to. Okay, awesome. So now it looks like my tooltip component should be ready. Let's go over to localhost. Nope, let's go over to my stories and see, do we have a tooltip? Yes, indeed we do. Very cool. So it created the tooltip component for me. It created this story for my tooltip so it can very quickly see, is it working or not? If I hover over, yeah, cool, there's a tooltip. And if I hover over this one, there's a tooltip, and it looks like we can provide custom info, custom markdown or markup in that tooltip. And we can even control the placement. So that was right end, that was top end. That one doesn't quite look like top end, does it? But yeah, it looks like a lot of the placements are good. And I didn't have to write a line of code for any of this. All right. If I go over to my components inside of my documentation. Let's see if it created the documentation page for it. Indeed, it did. Here is tooltip. And yeah, these aren't the greatest docs, right? But this could be a good start for you. Let's see if what it has for us actually works. So here is a basic usage. All right. And then let's just go to that slug.view page. And I don't know, let's just paste it underneath the H1. Yeah, there it is. Okay, and yeah, indeed, that it works exactly like it said it would work inside of the documentation. So obviously this is not perfect, but it could be a really great starting point in order to get you moving more quickly on building a component library of your own. Okay. All right. Trying to think if there are any other tips and tricks I had left to really kind of mention inside of this process. Do note that it's certainly not perfect, right? This pagination component works pretty well. The card I thought looked pretty good. But one of the things that didn't work out so well was, let's see, the progress worked out pretty well. The avatar worked out really well. Where was one that really failed? I think the ones that failed, I git stashed them and just didn't commit them to the repository, if I remember correctly. Yeah, this is just an interesting way that you might consider combining existing technologies like Histoire, like Nuxt Content, and like Nuxt, or excuse me, like Rekka UI in order to create your own component library. Now, I didn't get into the Nuxt Layers bit of this and found that it didn't quite work exactly how I wanted it to. But the whole idea behind Nuxt Layers is that you can create components inside of a components directory, just like you would in a normal Nuxt project, but then extend this project in a new project so that you can reuse those components. I didn't quite get it working how I wanted it to, but if you use Nuxt and you haven't started working with Nuxt Layers yet, I definitely recommend you check that out. All right. Before I go, I did just want to quickly mention, once again, AI-driven development. If you're interested in learning how to boost your development workflows with AI, then go check out aidd.io. We are looking to help prepare you for the next wave of skills that you'll need in order to be successful in this this development career and in this wave of kind of uncertainty that we're all going through right now. All right, y'all, that is it for me. Thank you so very much for your time. I think we have maybe a few questions that that LF3 might have.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much for your talk. Also, it was nice seeing you before on the panel and here as well. So let's start with some questions. Again, we have a bunch of them, but let's see how many we will tackle. Okay, first question. How do you maintain code quality and consistency when using AI assistants?
Really, my biggest thing is a lot of people say, you know, read what the chat is telling you. My first inclination is I skip a lot of what is actually written in the chat and I go directly to read the code. So, you know, do make sure you actually read what's being produced for you. That's honestly the only way you can you can make sure that it's quality.
Thank you. Next question. Can you also automate and check if the creation worked by giving Cursor AI access to Playwright and to TDD?
Yeah, you could certainly do some automations around Playwright. I know they do have an MCP. Of course, you can also, that's one other thing I didn't have time to experiment with, but I did want to add in some automated testing to this process to where when you created a new component, it also wrote a component test for it. I didn't get around to doing that. But you can certainly help it, let it write some of those things for you, but ultimately you're the one that knows what you want right? It's still going to be up to you to make sure the things that it's testing is actually the outcomes that you desire to have, right? Because it's just like communicating with another human being. Um, we got to make sure it knows exactly what we want, and even if it tests that it did things correctly according to what it thinks we wanted, we still have to double check it, right?
Perfect. What types of components benefit most from AI-driven development?
What types of components? I don't know. I mean, I think if you're going for a custom look for your website or for your web application, obviously you probably want to come up with your own design system. I certainly wouldn't. Oh man, I'm sorry, y'all. My timer is going off and it fell on the floor.
That's
Um,
okay.
so I don't know if you could hear it or not, but it was bugging me. So if you need that customness in terms of looks, then yeah, I would develop that component library with the help of AI. If you don't need some more custom looks, I would always start with an existing library. I found that AI is really knowledgeable about ShadCN Vue if you're working in a Nuxt project, probably because a lot of its APIs kind of mimic the original ShadCN, which is a React library. And I found that AI is quite good at that as well. So it can translate very easily between ShadCN Vue and the original ShadCN. I would pick up something like that, to be honest, if you don't need a custom look.
Nice. And someone is asking, can you share your prompts later?
Yeah, absolutely. So on Twitter, I am Daniel Kelly _IO. I'll add that in the chat here in just a moment. So that's Daniel Kelly _IO. This little repo that I was dabbling with during the talk is publicly available on my GitHub repository. I will share the link to that on my Twitter so that anybody who wants it can play with it, experiment with it. Like I mentioned, it's certainly not perfect. It's just an experiment, but yeah, as you saw during the talk, it has some potential to really boost your workflow.
Nice. And someone else is also saying, I would love if Daniel could show us the different steps the agent went through to do the task. I don't know if this is possible.
Yeah, do this. Go download the repo and do exactly like I did. Tag that workflow doc, tell it to create a component, and read the task. I mean, you can literally see exactly what I'm going to see. If you want to break that down further, you can see it by running it yourself.
Nice. And would you say this process can be replicated in Windsurf? I'm using IntelliJ IDEA and they have a plugin unlike Cursor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, as long as what you're working in, which I think all these tools do, as long as what you're working in can read and write files to the system and then interact with either Gemini or Anthropic's Claude or any of those, it can do exactly what we just did. There's nothing special about Cursor in this case. By the way, maybe worth mentioning is I do prefer Gemini to do a lot of these coding processes for me. I found it just works best, and that's exactly what I was doing during the talk, was using Gemini.
And again, although we have quite a lot of questions, I don't think we can go through everything, but you shared earlier your X account, so maybe folks can find you there. So we will go through one last question for now. What are the best practices for writing prompts when using AI for component development?
Be specific with what you want. During the talk, I was really open to, it producing, just a basic tabs component. But if you have something very, or not a tabs, but a tooltip. But if you have something specific in mind, do tell it up front. It'll save kind of backtracking and making it work around existing code later. So do be upfront about what you want.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Daniel. I know that you're working hard and you always have amazing presentations and very practical presentation. So thank you very much for that. Have a lovely day and see you soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.